Mabel, where the heck did Jared Kushner come from? Like, we have not seen him since Trump took office again. And then suddenly in the last week, he's responsible for peace between Israel and Palestine.
I know, it seemed like he was kind of in political exile, just kind of hanging out in Miami with Ivanka for Trump's second term until he kind of popped out of nowhere. But it wasn't just him. I guess Steve Witkoff, who's Trump's Middle East envoy, also helped really put this whole deal together, which is surprising because the two of them don't really have a strong political or diplomatic background. They actually worked in New York real estate, but they've really been hands-on with this deal. They were involved in Egypt with all the crucial negotiations with all those Middle Eastern countries, and then actually proposed the deal to the Israeli cabinet. Apparently, they even spoke face-to-face with the leaders of Hamas at like the Four Seasons in Egypt.
Yeah, they're literally being called the chief architects of this 20-point plan. And I guess on Saturday, they both visited Gaza with the IDF and the top U.S. commander in the region to inspect parts of Gaza. And that's pertinent because the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Jared and Steve Witkoff will be super involved in the Gaza reconstruction effort. And they're actually in early discussions with developers to pursue Trump's Riviera of the Middle East vision.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. Remember, during Trump's first term, Jared was kind of the one who was talking about how waterfront property in Gaza would be super lucrative. So he kind of invented the idea of Trump Gaza.
I just can't believe this is real. I thought it was just that AI video meme joke, but I guess Jared has already been in touch with associates who could serve on a Gaza development board.
And it's interesting to see how they describe themselves. They call themselves deals guys who work for the ultimate deal guy, which is Trump. It seems like their approach in getting this done is very simple. It's get a yes first. No matter what you do, just get a yes, get an agreement on the table, and hash out all of the details later, which is very evident in this peace plan that gets pretty confusing. Where we're at right now is that Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire. And just earlier this week, we saw all of those videos of, the hostages that were finally released from Gaza, and then over 2,000 Palestinian prisoners released from Israel. And all those videos were really emotional because everyone was just happy to be reunited after 2 years of fighting. Another huge win is that the UN finally started delivering aid to Gaza.
But experts say that still is not enough food because there are just harrowing numbers coming out of the World Health Organization. So they categorize hunger in 5 phases from 1, none, to phase 5, which is catastrophe famine. And 641,000 Palestinians are in that worst phase 5.
Wow.
And then in the phase 4, which is right below, which is emergency hunger, 1.1 million are in that phase. And put in perspective, 0 are in phase 1 and 2, which is minimal stress.
Wow.
Well, in the meantime, Trump obviously visited the Middle East earlier this week. He gave a speech to the Knesset, which is Israel's parliament in Jerusalem. And he called it the historic dawn of a new Middle East. Quote, generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change. And then in the middle of his speech, he also encouraged Israel's president to pardon Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's facing corruption charges, and called Netanyahu one of the greatest wartime leaders. And then Trump went to Egypt for the Middle East summit with 24 other Middle East leaders, including the president of the Palestinian Authority. But the big question is, Trump has made no mention through all of this if he's looking at a 2-state solution.
Right, which is part of what has made this deal just so confusing and weird, because what is actually the path to long-lasting peace?
Well, the mediators that helped them reach this deal said that the two sides decided to delay talks on the most difficult issues because neither side was ready for a comprehensive peace plan.
And I guess that makes sense. It's just, it feels like everything can fall apart very easily. So we looked through this 20-point peace plan, and there's 3 sections that really stood out to us that feel like they do need to be hashed out ASAP. So the first part is post-war Gaza. Trump's plan says that Gaza basically has to be governed by a technocratic Palestinian committee plus a board of peace that's headed by Trump. And I mean, Hamas says that it's open to the idea, but obviously all these details need to be worked out. But to me, I feel like Gaza is destroyed. I mean, there's no economy, there's no hospitals, there's nothing. So who's going to pay to rebuild it? Will it be Israel or other countries are going to pitch in? There's no mention of that. Then the second big point is disarmament. So Hamas would have to basically lay down all of its weapons, which makes sense, and either seek amnesty or leave Gaza for exile abroad.
And this is a super important point because Netanyahu has repeatedly said the war cannot end unless Hamas is disarmed.
And the last point that feels the most important is that the peace plan calls for full Israeli withdrawal, the troops need to be gone from the region, but Israeli troops are still there. and it's unclear when and if they'd ever leave. And already we're seeing instances of violence. So on Monday, when Palestinian prisoners were being released, an Israeli armored vehicle shot rubber pellets and tear gas at crowds that were watching these prisoners being released. And then Tuesday, 5 Palestinians were killed by a drone strike.
Doesn't that count as breaking it?
No one has said anything. So that's the thing. The peace plan sounds great on paper, but who is enforcing any of this?
Well, checking back in with Jared, he and Ivanka spoke to a rally of tens of thousands at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And that's the square where hostage families and supporters have gathered every week for the past 2 years, waiting for their loved ones to return. And Jared said a very cryptic tease. He said the negotiations have been rocky. One day we'll tell you the story. It'll make you laugh. It'll make you cry. It was crazy.
Who would laugh?
And then Ivanka said, the president wanted me to share that he sees you, he hears you, he stands with you always. But while she was speaking, the crowd held a big banner that said, Nobel President Trump, and chanted, thank you, President Trump. But what's crazy is when Steve Witkoff mentioned Netanyahu, the crowd booed.
So you're probably wondering, why was Jared a part of this entire peace plan? And the answer is that he kind of has crazy contacts in the region. Remember, during Trump's first term, he was Trump's senior advisor, which is a huge position. And during that time, he built a lot of diplomatic relations in Arab countries. So he was actually the architect of something called the Abraham Accords, which normalized relations between Israel and 3 Arab states.
Yeah, and apparently he's been working behind the scenes this term more than we realized. So he advised Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on trade negotiations with China. He also has been involved in bipartisan criminal justice talks behind the scenes.
Yeah, he seems like he's kind of everywhere because his role now is a lot more foggy. He's a volunteer advisor. And even though he's gotten a lot of bipartisan support for what he's been doing, it's weird that he isn't a government employee because he isn't subject to laws and disclosure requirements that would prevent conflict of interest. So a lot of people are worried about his business dealings in the Middle East. Like Kushner's private equity firm, Affinity Partners, for which he's taken money from all of these government wealth firms in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE.
And the firm manages almost $5 billion of assets. So that's a ton.
And it's not just business. He seems to have some close personal relations with a lot of very powerful figures in the Middle East. So during Trump's first term, Jared was apparently texting the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia all the time.
Casual.
And he was texting him so much that Trump's national security team would get really annoyed at him because he was just bypassing protocol, texting him all the time. And then apparently Jared also kind of knows Netanyahu. They go way back. When he was a teenager, Jared apparently gave up his bedroom so that Netanyahu would have a place to sleep when he visited the Kushner's house in New Jersey.
That's wild. Well, he recently did a podcast, which I listened to, so you don't have to, and I will tell you what he said. So he recently launched a company called Brain Co., which is funded by a lot of Silicon Valley billionaires. And it literally helps companies identify how they can better use AI in their workflow. And no one knew about this company. It was in stealth mode until a month ago when it came forward to announce that it had secured $30 million in financing. And since Brainco works around the world, it's very international, Jared kept emphasizing that his savvy was all learned when he was being a public servant. In Trump's first term, he called it an intense PhD, basically, that he got. And the craziest thing is he said one of their clients is a small foreign government and that Brainco helped them digitize their records and archives, but he wouldn't say which one. So, who is it?
And a reporter asked Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, about this conflict of interest, and she was very defensive in her answer.
Frankly, despicable that you're trying to suggest that it's inappropriate for Jared Kushner, who is widely respected around the world and has great trust in relationships with these critical partners in these countries, to strike a 20-point comprehensive detailed peace plan that no other administration would ever be able to achieve.
I mean, honestly, this makes me think that the government needs a non-compete. You know how some jobs make you sign an agreement that if you leave the company, you won't work in the industry for a year or two? I mean, the government needs that too, so you can't just take the official contacts and official information that you learn working for the government into your own personal business right away. But that's not the only conflict of interest question being asked. Why is this peace deal happening right now?
And that is a question that we keep asking because for so much of this war, Trump didn't really care all of that much. But this all kind of seemed to really change when Israel fighter jets launched 10 missiles into Qatar on September 9th and killed 6 people. And that's what really jump-started this aggressive strategy from the U.S. to get this peace deal done. And it's because the U.S. administration, especially under Trump, has become very, very close with Qatar. They've poured billions of dollars into U.S. companies, especially ones that directly benefit Trump's family and his friends.
They gave us the free, decked out, huge plane that Trump's going to take with him when he leaves office.
So then Trump took to Truth Social after this attack and said that he was really unhappy. And then a couple weeks later, he passed an executive order saying that no matter what, he's going to protect Qatar and like defend them through anything, kind of, you know, warning Israel, being like, back off. And so a UN ceasefire proposal came just a few weeks after, and Trump, for the first time, really started to pressure Netanyahu, being like, you need to sign this deal. It's time to get this war over with. And this is crazy. Reporting has come out that before the press conference announcing this ceasefire plan, Trump cornered Netanyahu in the Oval Office and like forced him to call the Qatari prime minister, being like, you need to apologize to him right now. And a Qatari official and a bunch of White House officials helped him write the apology and stayed in the Oval Office to make sure that he actually like stayed true to script. And Jared Kushner was also in the room.
That's crazy.
Wow. Well, that was a lot. I mean, obviously, peace between Israel and Palestine is such a huge accomplishment. It's something Trump should be very proud of, but we can't go through this whole piece without, of course, mentioning the fact that Trump's new vendetta is now against the Nobel Peace Prize Committee because he didn't win.
So he kind of lashed out. He said he ended 8 wars, and he was coming for Obama because of his win, and said that Obama got the prize for doing nothing but destroying our country, and said his own 2024 reelection was much more important than Obama's historic win in 2008.
Who's even talking about that right now?
And funny, so we know Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado ended up winning the award because she's fighting for democracy in Venezuela. And actually, if you look at the Truth Social receipts, Trump inadvertently had boosted her chances through a Truth Social post where he called her a freedom fighter and said she must stay safe and alive, and was basically just applauding what she was doing. So that's a big oops moment. But maybe because of his work with the ceasefire, we'll see how it holds. Maybe he'll win it next year.